Hello and welcome to Airheads, a not-so-serious look at the serious business of royal rumours, gossip and gowns. I'm Tom.
And I'm Maeve.
And as usual, whenever we plan to take a week off, something comes up to foil those plans. This week we were notified that we had to self-isolate, so we thought, what better way to spend our time than by reading the Sovereign Grant Report?
Yeah, trapped inside and 116 pages of the Royal Household's annual financial report to keep us entertained. We talk about the Sovereign Grant all the time. It is the taxpayer-funded grant that pays for the Queen's official expenditure in her role as head of state, including her work, her household, maintenance of the palaces, and travel costs.
But it doesn't cover security, which royal finance expert David McClure estimated cost £150 million in 2021, while former MP and royal author Norman Baker estimated it cost £200 million.
Yeah, so the Sovereign Grant is made up of two parts, and this year the total was £85.9 million. That's a £3.5 million increase from last year, for those of you who remember our Accounting for Royal Dummies episode last year. So the two parts of that are the core grant, which is the part I was mentioning earlier. That's 51.5 million, and that's for all the Queen's official business. And then the other part, the 34.4 million, is for resurfacing Buckingham Palace. We've talked about this before, but basically Buckingham Palace is undergoing this huge refurbishment over the last few years, and it's costing £359 million. And in The Sun, Norman Baker, the former MP and royal author Tom just mentioned, pointed out that Buckingham Palace itself had estimated the cost would be 55 million max back in 2008.
They are taking us for a ride. But Norman Baker also noted that the royals paid to refurbish Windsor Castle themselves after the fire in 1992. So they're clearly not reaching into their own pockets for this.
I know. And we've talked about this before, but just to go over it quickly, the Sovereign Grant, the Queen's income, is based on a 25% share of the profits of the Crown Estate, which is a property portfolio of valuable real estate in London and elsewhere, stuff like around Regent Street and all that kind of thing. Last year, the estate announced its profits would fall significantly as a result of the pandemic. I remember us talking about that. Yet, as we said at the time, and as we say now again, no matter how much the Crown Estate profits fall, the Sovereign Grant Act 2011 stipulates that Sovereign Grant cannot decrease.
And that means that the Queen keeps more of the Crown Estate's profits, which in effect means that she's going to be receiving money that would have otherwise gone to fund public services.
So I thought we could talk about some of the top takeaways from this breakdown of the royal family's finances. The one I think a lot of you had mentioned to us and that obviously stood out to us was the 3.2 million transport bill.
In a year when no one left home.
This was incredibly shocking. You know, we saw that there was £48,000 spent on Prince William and Kate Middleton's tour, the Royal Train tour, across 2 days.
Jesus.
And when Prince Charles went to a funeral in Kuwait, the cost of that was £59,000. But the most striking figure was the £2.1 million spent on helicopters.
Helicopters! These people, they think they're in a Bond movie. But of these helicopter journeys, 47 of them fall under the £15,000 threshold, above which you have to state what it was for. So 47 of them are not itemised, despite coming to almost £670,000 altogether. And we can be pretty certain that this is like Charles or the Cambridges flying between their multiple homes during the pandemic.
Yeah, I would say that's definitely what that is. And it goes without saying, but it is so shocking that these people who brand themselves as leaders in the field of environmentalism and combating the climate crisis choose to take enormously expensive and energy inefficient helicopters for domestic travel rather than getting scheduled flights or scheduled trains or even fucking driving.
It's ridiculous. Like, Will was trained how to fly a helicopter so he could rescue people in need, not so that he could, like, pop to his second home for a spot of dinner.
I do think as well that it's somewhat remarkable that this is the same week that Will announced the date for the Earthshot Prize Awards, this like big flashy environmental prize he's giving out, as he has also been revealed to be taking helicopters probably between Norfolk and London for the past year.
It's ridiculous. What a hypocrite. But we also found out the salary for the Queen's private secretary, Edward Young, which comes to £220,000, which is more than the Prime Minister is paid.
And given how little the Queen did this year, that is an absolutely astonishing salary for this man. The report did give some details on the number of engagements that the royals did in the past year. Apparently they did almost 1,470 official engagements in the UK and overseas. I was trying to figure out which royal family members they are including in that count, but it doesn't specify. I would base this on the online database for royal engagements, which lists the following: the Queen, Prince Charles, Camilla Parker Bowles, Prince William, Kate Middleton, Princess Anne, Prince Edward, Sophie Wessex, the Duke and Duchess of Kent, the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester, Prince and Princess Michael of Kent, and Princess Alexandria. So that's 15 people. And by that count, that would be 98 engagements, or Zoom calls, basically, each over the past year.
And how many of those were Prince Michael of Kent calling Putin? The report notes that the Sussexes made a payment of £2.4 million to cover the refurbishment of Frogmore Cottage, that sum of money that we've heard so much about.
Yeah.
As a result of which, according to the report, the royal household has been able to offset the impact of a £10.8 million reduction in income. And this is alongside recruitment and pay freezes.
Yeah.
Notably no pay freezes for the actual royal family.
Yeah.
But a lot of people have been chatting about whether this payment from the Sussexes has saved the royals. I'm not sure they were anywhere near financial ruin, and I think they would have been okay anyway. But it does look quite bad, given there's been renewed debate over when Charles cut Harry off financially last year.
Yeah, so according to these accounts, Charles spent $4.4 million supporting the Cambridges and the Sussexes last year, which is $1.15 million less than he spent the previous year, though these accounts don't specify how much was allocated to Will and Kate and how much to Harry and Meghan. But Charles's spokesperson said he was financing Harry and Meghan until summer of last year.
The spokesperson said, in January 2020, when the Duke and Duchess announced that they were going to move away from the working royal family, the Duke said that they would work towards becoming financially independent. The Prince of Wales allocated a substantial sum to support them with this transition. That funding ceased in the summer of last year. The couple are now financially independent.
And I think, in a lot of places, this comment was reported as a contradiction of Prince Harry's claims in the Oprah Winfrey interview, where he said that his family had cut him off financially in the first quarter of last year, which I think a lot of us assumed to mean March, when there was that official deadline of Harry and Meghan stepping back from their positions as senior working royals.
Yeah, but clearly a Sussex spokesperson has been on the phone to royal reporter and author Amit Scobie to clarify that Harry actually meant the first quarter of the UK's fiscal year, which is April to June. I am actually kind of surprised that Harry even knows when the fiscal year in the UK starts and ends.
Me too. And I'm surprised that he would be so well acquainted with it that he would assume that everyone would make that same assumption, that he was talking about April to June. But Amit Scobie tweeted, despite some confusing reports, Prince Charles and Prince Harry's timelines for the period the Sussex's financial support ended are the same. Clarence House says funding continued until last summer. Q1 of the UK's fiscal year is April to June, and Harry told Oprah the same. Which I thought was such an obvious bit of excuse me, if you actually note his words, he said the first quarter. Just so nitpicky.
Yeah.
But I guess everybody's nitpicky with Harry and Meghan, so it's become second nature to them to be nitpicky too. I do think, though, just in general, reading all the stuff about the sovereign grant is so infuriating, because it's just disgraceful that the royals didn't insist on a reduction in the sovereign grant, or at least fucking pay freeze of their own, like you said, to keep it at the same level as it was last year, instead of having it inflate another 3.5 million.
Yeah, it's disgusting. According to Sunday Times Rich List, which was published last month, the Queen's wealth stands at £365 million. Charles is worth £100 million, and no senior member of the family is worth less than £20 million.
I know. So none of these people are going to be hard up, but it's beyond time for them to renegotiate the sovereign grant because we just shouldn't be paying this amount of money. And, you know, there's all this stuff about how, oh, it's only £1.29p per person, but we know that's not real.
Yeah.
It's actually much more than that because, like Dave McClure and Norma Baker said, there's a security costs, there's all kinds of other things that aren't taken into account officially.
Yeah, which like triple or quadruple the amount.
And Norma Baker wrote in The Sun, this is not about whether we have a monarchy or not. It's about whether we have one that respects the need to live within the nation's means, one that doesn't take the mickey. The greatest threat to the future of the monarchy comes not from the country's Republican contingent, but from the ordinary man and woman in the street. From all of us who have had to tighten our belts and live within our means, and who look at all the royal excess and before long will say, enough is enough.
And we're saying that now. Enough is enough.
And he's saying that in The Sun, which I think is very interesting.
Yeah. But also, in this report, for the first time, Buckingham Palace revealed its diversity statistics. They revealed that the proportion of ethnic minority employees is 8.5% of staff, and the target for 2022 is 10%. I think it's worth noting, well, firstly, that these stats just lump all non-white people together in one group. And they also don't go into what roles these people have within the household.
Johnny Diamond, the royal correspondent for the BBC, wrote this week, in London, where the majority of royal workers are based, just under 40% of the population is from an ethnic minority, but 8.5% of the royal staff are.
It's absolutely egregious, and I can't help but wonder if the figure might be a little bit better if the Queen hadn't managed to get herself exempt from the UK's anti-discrimination laws.
Yeah, well, Clarence House also released its diversity figures, 8%. And Charles' spokesman said, it isn't good enough and we are determined to do better.
Buckingham Palace also made some vague motions at an apology too, with an anonymous palace source telling Harper's Bazaar, we recognise we are not where we would like to be, and that despite all our efforts to target recruitment, train managers and build an inclusive workplace, the results have not been what we would like.
That's just so passive to me.
Yeah.
Despite all our efforts, look at everything we did, and just somehow we still have an almost entirely white workforce.
Yeah, this sounds like total bullshit, and moreover, it makes it sound as though the non-white people are not pulling their weight here in terms of getting the numbers up or something.
It was very telling that Kensington Palace did not release their statistics.
Yeah, make of that what you will.
That means they're almost certainly way lower, humiliatingly lower than 8%, which is already humiliating.
Yeah. I mean, this is really fucking embarrassing for them. Like, to not even be able to release the figures in the first place and not to have the, like, balls to just say sorry.
I mean, I don't think the others really said sorry. They didn't use
true.
the word sorry, so I wouldn't consider those apologies from Clarence House or Buckingham Palace. But I do think the team at Kensington Palace probably have that fucking haunting clip of Prince William saying, we're very much not a racist family. A video clip of him saying that, which could easily be played after a news report about how Kensington Palace only has 2% non-white staff or whatever. Like, just knowing that that's a possibility, they clearly thought it's actually less embarrassing if we just don't release figures at all. And this is just so embarrassing, and it goes to show that obviously they shouldn't be exempt from these fucking employment discrimination laws, that they probably need them more than anyone.
Yeah, we need more scrutiny here.
I did think it was funny that the Sovereign Grant Report noted the Palace had introduced a shift in its diversity strategy in early 2020, aimed at increasing the understanding of inclusion and creating opportunities for staff to share their views. And then they have this just sort of word salad where they say, as part of International Women's Day, employees were encouraged to make gender equality and inclusion pledges. Employee articles have also been published on the intranet covering topics such as lockdown experiences, Pride, Ramadan and Black History Month. The household recognised National Inclusion Week, with each day focusing on a different theme. I sort of read that in a like, the household even recognised National Inclusion Week and each day had a different theme.
What more could you possibly want from us? This just like, well, one, it sounds like school projects and these are all adults, but also doesn't it sound like the kind of situation where they've said like, oh, you celebrate Ramadan, would you mind giving a presentation to the rest of the office about what that sort of is and what you eat and things? Like, it sounds, once again, incredibly embarrassing. This whole thing is humiliating, I think, for the country, given that these people are meant to be like the pinnacle of us. But surely, I hear you say, the highly anticipated diversity SAR will kick all this into shape.
No, actually. Because according to Omid Scobie's report in Harper's Bazaar, the palace has decided not to go ahead with that. They have shelved all plans to hire a diversity chief for now, anyway.
And speaking to Harper's Bazaar, political commentator and author Shola Mos-Shogbamimu said, "The decision to no longer hire a diversity chief at Buckingham Palace speaks for itself and evidently pays lip service to a commitment to diversity they have zero intention of radically implementing. If in 2021 the monarchy does not see it must evolve on the issues of race, racism and race inclusion, it must be brought subject to the same laws and consequences the rest of us are subject to. The royal household cannot be expected to regulate itself on racism and race inclusion. No public institution should. The monarchy work for us, and I want them held to account when they do wrong."
I'm just seeing like somebody in Clarence House like pointing at the blog post on the intranet about Black History Month, being like, what about this? It's just so pathetic.
And the whole thing, you know, even with these vague gestures towards having some kind of transparency to do with the diversity within the royal household, there are still so many unanswered questions.
And I just wonder, what is the reason for not hiring this diversity chief?
The only reasons I could think of is, I guess, a payroll issue, or that they realise if they hire someone to get their opinion, they might actually have to do something about it.
It's that. It's definitely that.
Yeah.
That they know that it's beyond salvaging and that they don't really want to change.
That's the thing. I mean, clearly there's such an institutional problem here that in order to improve, they'll have to make big changes, and clearly they are not very interested in that.
Yeah, they seem to be pretty comfortable where they are.
And can you imagine the story it would be if the diversity SAR left and said, they never implemented any of my changes or listened to what I had to say, which is probably what would happen.
The other thing that we had been looking forward to in this Sovereign Grant report was the result of the bullying investigation into claims made against Meghan Markle, which was being conducted over the past 3 months by an independent law firm and being paid for privately by the royals.
That's been delayed. According to the Sunday Times, it will either be included in next year's report or the palace may explore other ways to address suggested changes to its human resources policies and procedures resulting from the inquiry.
Which makes me think that they may never make the results public.
Yeah, if they don't get the result that they want.
Because I had seen the Times report said that they had been criticised for not acting on these bullying claims and for taking so long with the investigation, but I don't think 3 months is that long.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you hear from Robert Lacey, the royal historian and consultant for the Crown, who's continuing to promote the reissue of his book, Battle of Brothers, and he wrote in the Mail this week that Harry and Meghan have apparently drawn up a 30-page dossier in justification of their treatment of staff, setting out precise details of why they parted company with certain personnel. So clearly Harry and Meghan aren't just like gonna roll over and let the investigation come to like a really quick conclusion.
Yeah, I don't know what kind of access this guy has to the Sussex camp, but I can imagine Harry and Meghan wanting a blow-by-blow breakdown of all of the allegations against Meghan, because a lot of what we've heard so far has been incredibly vague.
Yeah.
And I can imagine that they would want to be included in this investigation and hear what's going on.
Yeah.
But I thought we could talk a little bit more about Robert Lacey's piece in the Mail, the bulk of which has to do with the tensions between Prince William and Prince Harry. And he starts out by talking about their reunion at Prince Philip's funeral. He emphasises that the brothers were subtly brought together by Kate, who then left the pair to the brotherly exchange of words seen on camera. which we talked about at the time. But once they got past the cameras, Tom, Lacey says they started quarrelling again.
God, very messy. A longtime friend has said to him, there they were, at each other's throats as fiercely as ever. The rage and anger between those two has grown so incredibly deep. Too many harsh and wounding things have been said.
They were at each other's throats at somebody's funeral.
Yeah. I mean, we should probably bear in mind that, like, this guy's book is called The Battle of Brothers. So it is, like, in his interest to promote them as battling. It wouldn't be so good to add in all these chapters about how they're actually getting on fine.
Well, he puts a sort of Shakespearean lens on this battle because he characterises the battle as love versus duty. Harry's defensiveness of his wife versus Will's defensiveness of the monarchy.
One of these things I can get behind, and one of these I absolutely cannot.
But he does sort of talk about what each side is thinking, and he says that even Sussex supporters have noted the bizarre combination of self-promotion and self-pity that characterises Meghan and can see why it has infuriated William.
None of the Sussex supporters I've ever encountered online see it from that perspective.
Especially this quote he has from a close friend of Harry's who says, Meghan can be a 500% nightmare. The never-ending PR. She's just so American.
Really close friend of Harry speaking like this?
500% nightmare is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I do kind of want that on a t-shirt.
On Will and Kate's side, however, their friends are willing to concede the jealousy the Cambridges once felt at being overshadowed by Harry and Meghan, and that history will reveal how William and Kate were guilty of some sharp-elbowed tactics in seeking to keep Harry and Meghan in their place.
Like the budget flight.
Sharp enough elbows, all right.
But Lacey also says that there is no way a palace source would have contradicted Harry's claim that he cleared the name of Lilibet for his new daughter with the Queen unless that contradiction had come from the very top. Her Majesty was not amused.
Yeah, that's a bit striking, I think.
And I think that's kind of what we were thinking at the time, that, like, for the palace to be briefing against the naming of this baby seemed like...
To be briefing against a baby?
Yeah. Seemed like taking a very decided stance, and it would make sense to me that that kind of order would come from the top.
Yeah, because, you know, as we said before, we often hear from people who say, oh, the Queen has to clean house and she's got to get better people working for her. But as we are reminded time and time again, the Queen is the big boss and they do what the boss says.
Yeah. And this idea that the Queen herself would be annoyed about the name Lilibet being used, I think does make sense to me, because a few weeks ago we saw this stuff about how the Queen was not happy with Harry because he kept trying to separate the Queen as grandmother from the Queen as head of state, and she very much sees herself as both and head of state above all. So this idea that, like, a cute nickname is being kind of brought out into public light might play on that annoyance of hers.
Yeah, that was a report in the Telegraph. I think, though, as well, it's possible that the Queen is saying one thing to Harry and saying something else to her staff.
Yeah, that's true.
But back to Harry and Will, where things stand at the moment, according to Robert Lacey, is that Harry is reportedly willing to admit to some of his mistakes in the hopes of reconciling, but Will is reluctant to accept that the House of Windsor simply cannot afford to go on ostracising the only mixed-race members of the family, and that Will has no choice but to swallow his pride and smile beside Meghan on next year's Platinum Jubilee balcony.
One friend pointed out to him that everyone has a difficult sister-in-law, to which Will nodded his head in sage acceptance. Then suddenly he broke out angrily. "But look at the way that bloody woman treated my staff! Merciless!"
Such drama.
Has he heard about the way his uncle Andrew has treated his staff?
And Lacey is saying that, you know, their mother would have been able to help ease the tensions between them, and that their father should too, but his priorities are set elsewhere. He quotes a friend who says, "The main thing Charles wants is for the pair of them to smile on Camilla becoming his full queen consort, instead of princess consort, which is officially preordained at present. Charles is fixated about it, something he never stops trying to negotiate with both of them, but they will never say yes to Camilla taking the place that should have been filled by their mother.
God.
So it all comes back to Camilla, Tom.
Someone should make a TV show about this.
I can't believe this is still revolving around Camilla. I feel like Camilla is so left out of all this kind of stuff. And I feel like that's what she would prefer as well. She doesn't want to be caught in between this battle of brothers.
Yeah, I feel like they should just let her be Queen Consort as well. Like,
well, obviously you think that.
She's
Number one Camilla Parker Bowles fan over here.
Queen Consort of my heart already. The Lacey also claims Buckingham Palace has rejected Charles's plans to deny the Sussexes' children HRH titles when he becomes king.
Yeah, that was something that was kind of being discussed the last few weeks in relation to Charles's desire for the slimmed down monarchy, that he was thinking of changing the letters patent so that Archie and Lilibet wouldn't receive the HRHs when he becomes king, but apparently the Queen has sort of smacked down that idea and they will get the titles. I also just don't think Charles would do that now, because it would make him even more unpopular when he is trying to win popularity back, and especially for Camilla.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
We also got some other news on Will and Kate this week. There was a story in the Daily Mail by Royal Editor Rebecca English, very curious story this week, that Will and Kate have been quietly scoping out new schools and potentially homes in Berkshire, which is where the Middleton family is from.
George and Charlotte are in school in London at the moment at St Thomas's Battersea, which accepts students up to the age of 13. But according to Rebecca English, raising their young family in the bustling capital is not believed to be part of the Cambridge's long-term plans.
Yeah, the report says that in recent weeks, the couple's discreet inquiries, not that discreet obviously, about and visits to future schools for their children in Kate's home county have set local tongues wagging all the way to the Daily Mail.
Yeah.
And she emphasises that Kensington Palace will remain the Cambridge's London home and office, and that Will and Kate are acutely conscious of the 4.5 million cost to taxpayers of renovating their 20-room private family apartment, in addition to creating workspace for staff, which I thought was a very generous justification she probably wouldn't afford to Harry and Meghan, for example.
Yeah.
But as she goes on, what it means for Anmer Hall, Will and Kate's private home in Norfolk, is less clear. The couple love the house and the area where they have spent the vast majority of the past year homeschooling their children during lockdown. They see it as their family home and no public money has been spent on it. But Anmer is a long trek from London, often requiring the family to travel by helicopter. And is far from Kate's parents, sister and brother, who play a huge part in their children's lives. Some sources have speculated they could choose to rent privately in Berkshire as a short-term solution.
Just want to say, it took us, an hour and 15 minutes on the train?
Yeah.
From London to Norfolk.
Yeah.
So it's really not that far.
Yeah, especially if you fucking drive, if you have a car.
And especially if you're listening to this in America, you're probably like, Jesus Christ.
But according to the Mail sources, Will and Kate are likely to remain in London during term time, but may go for weekly or flexi boarding options in Berkshire when the children are older, which would mean they could still use Anmer Hall at weekends and holidays. I don't know what older means. She points out that Prince William and Prince Harry started boarding school at 8.
Yeah, I wonder if they're going to do that with George. That seems brutal.
I don't think so.
Yeah, it seems like so old-fashioned. But also, if they're boarding, then they'll only be home on weekends and holidays when they'll be at Anmer Hall. So why does the whole family need to go to Berkshire? I'm very confused by this, and it seems like maybe this is more of a pointed barb at Charles.
I definitely think it has some element of a response to Charles, if we are assuming that that plan that was floated in the Sunday Times recently for the Cambridges to move to Scotland was something coming from Charles's side, because this piece has no mention of Scotland whatsoever.
Yeah.
And at the time we suggested that may be their way of mooting this plan and seeing what the public mood was. I think this is also a way for them to test the waters. And I really do wonder what the public reaction would be like if Will and Kate were to buy another house in England.
Yeah.
Because I do think it would be different if it was in Scotland. But if this place in Berkshire, which is, not that far from Norfolk and London, to have 3 homes also close to each other seems, absolutely astonishingly extravagant.
Yeah, when you have like every resource possible to travel wherever you want anyway.
And I think even the fact that there wasn't taxpayer money spent on Anmar Hall isn't going to matter to people. I think they would need to sell that property.
Yeah.
Or, I don't know.
Turn it into a centre for early years development.
That's a wonderful idea, Tom.
Well, on to quote of the week. Kate went to the Natural History Museum's Wildlife Garden this week to make toy spiders with local school children.
She named her spider Cuddles.
I was just like rolled my eyes so hard when I heard that.
It's very hard to talk to kids, Tom. But as well as this, she shared some honey, homemade honey she had made at Anmar Hall with these children. And she said, "Would you like to try some? This came specially from my beehive. See if it tastes the same as at home. Does it taste like honey from the shops? Does it taste like flowers?" Every time you see a bee, say thank you so much because they make delicious honey.
Because to me, this quote is just her saying, "Does it taste better than the horrible honey your lazy mum buys from the shops?" I'm sure she didn't say it in that way.
I know,
Like, it's
but just
such a funny thing to
the
see
way
written
it
down.
reads is so hilarious to me. And I did look to see if there was a clip of it because I was trying to imagine how would you ask this without it sounding like, "See if it tastes the same as at home." See if it tastes infinitely better. Oh my god. I just thought that was so funny. But this event is also the
Locus and focus
of our Fit for a Queen this week. Kate wore a very cool spin on one of her classic outfit formulas, jeans and a blazer. Instead of the usual dark skinny jeans, she wore those great high-waisted cropped slim leg jeans in a much lighter wash from And Other Stories, the same ones that she wore in her vaccine selfie that we loved so much. And she had a new blazer, very luxe new blazer.
There's a coral utilitarian style blazer by Chloe with oversized cargo pockets and sporty elasticated cuffs and waistband.
And it was very luxe indeed.
Yeah.
It cost £1,795 full price.
Jeez.
A runway piece, which I thought was surprisingly fashiony for Kate, but it absolutely made the look for me, and I was glad to see her mixing it up like this, even if I'm not totally convinced by the blazer, and certainly not by the cost of the blazer.
Yeah. She also wore Vejas with it, which I think we just think of as Meghan's shoes now.
I know. Every time she wears them, I'm like, oh, she's wearing Meghan's shoes. Because she sort of has like Superga's are her shoes.
Yeah.
But anyway, this was an exciting new look from Kate. I always appreciate that. First in line, Tom. Who is it this week?
I'm going to go with the Queen this week for once again getting away with daylight robbery.
I know, the cover during the Sovereign Grant has been so muted, as it always is, I suppose. But I was really struck that people weren't talking more about the diversity report, the fact that they released those figures, and how shaming that should have been for the Queen.
Yeah.
Very much not a racist family. That just sort of sailed by without much comment, as did the 3.5 million increase, as did the fact that the Sovereign Grant continues to be so incredibly bloated and just out of control. It just keeps rising and rising without anybody trying to put a stop to it.
It's totally disproportionate to the work that they do.
And disproportionate to the means of the nation, as Nora Baker put it. Like, this year of all years, people just shouldn't be putting up with this.
I think that much like Kate taking the bee's honey, the Queen has been hoovering up our tax money and doesn't even have the decency to say, "Thank you so much for making such delicious cash."
Well, even she said thanks so much, I tell her to go fuck herself and give me my money back.
Yeah. But, you know, she is the master of nothing sticking to her.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Well, Next week,
We'll be back with everything about Diana.
we have the statue unveiling at Kensington Palace on Thursday, which is just going to be Will and Harry, no other members of the royal family, and no royal rota, just one reporter from the Press Association. So that will also be a very understated event. I am fascinated to see what happens.
They have a blazing row right in the middle of it.
Yeah, I hope we can get to go see the statue at some point, because I would like to see it in person.
Yeah, once we no longer have to isolate.
Yeah, when we're free to roam the sunken gardens. Oh, also, if you enjoyed this episode, or any episode, we would really appreciate it if you would leave us a nice review, please.
Yeah, we read all the reviews, and we've had a few bad ones recently, but it would be nice.
Very bad ones, so it would be a very nice treat, if you wouldn't mind. You could also just write, abolish the monarchy.
Yeah, 5 stars, abolish the monarchy. That's the kind of review we love to see.
Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you have a great week. Bye.
Bye.
Run! Go! Get to the chopper!